Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Dorr. I am the Director of Professional Development for the International Studies Association. For those of you who are not familiar with the International Studies Association, it is the largest association dedicated to transnational and global affairs, and it is currently based in global affairs at the University of Connecticut. Today, we have Sarah Chow from the Boren Awards and Caitlin Ting, who will be talking about the Critical Language Scholarship. They are here to talk about the application procedures and how to maximize chances of your application. And they're also here as a resource. And so there will be a question and answer period following their presentations. You can ask questions in the chat or in the Q&A. And at this point, I will turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah, for having Boren here so I can talk to you guys about the Boren Scholarships and the Fellowships. For those of you who aren't aware, the Boren Scholarships and Fellowships, we are an government-sponsored award. It is sponsored, it's a Defense Language and National Security Education Office initiative. That is the sponsor within it's in the Defense Language and National Security Education Office is housed within the Department of Defense. Moving forward, I'm going to call it DLNSEO and DoD because that is a mouthful. That said, it is administered by the Institute of International Education, which is whom I work for. I don't work specifically for the DoD, I work for IIE. All right, let's move this over. All right, so first off, so what the Boren Awards is we are really dedicated to supporting students, both undergraduate and graduate students, have the ability to go abroad in an eligible region and really immerse themselves, study their language and culture intensely in an eligible world region, which for us is not your Western Europe, Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. In order to be eligible for the Boren, you have to be a U.S. citizen because it's a U.S. government award. You need to be studying a foreign language intensively. You do need to be matriculated in an accredited U.S. institution or applying to graduate school. That means we're not a traditional gap year program. You do have to be kind of enrolled seeking a degree at a U.S. institution. And lastly, you can't be a citizen of the destination country. You can be a dual citizen. If you're a dual citizen, that's awesome. I'm very jealous of you. But you just can't use the Boren to study in a country of which you're a citizen in. But again, because we're so focused on you guys spending long-term and immersing yourself in language study, it's a pretty generous award. So our goal, our preference is for you to go abroad for an entire year. Anywhere between 25 to 52 weeks is what we consider a year. And you receive $25,000 in order to receive, if you go abroad for a year. That said, if you can't go abroad for a year and you go abroad for a semester, anywhere between 12 and 24 weeks, you receive $12,500. And then for scholars, which are for the undergraduate students, if you are a STEM major, we have special eligibility rules because we recognize that for STEM majors, it can be difficult to go abroad for an entire semester or for an entire year. For scholars, if you're a STEM major, if you go abroad to study language for 8 to 11 weeks, you receive $8,000. I believe there's a couple of graduate students in the audience. So you, as a board, you can. There are two separate awards. You can apply for the Boren. You would apply for the Boren Scholarship as an undergraduate. Once you're a graduate student, you'd apply for a Boren Fellowship. And it's the same breakdown as far as amounts. The only thing is with the Boren Fellowships, we do not offer an 8 to 11 week summer eligibility for STEM students. But you can opt to do, you can receive $5,000 for doing a domestic summer program to kind of prepare you before you go abroad to study your overseas language. So who goes in the Boren? So the Boren has two types of routes that you can go through to do the Boren Awards. One is our flagship language initiatives, or FLEAs is what I'll call them moving forward. The ACLI program, which is where you would study African languages in Africa, either Senegal, you study French in Senegal, you could study Wolof in Senegal, Swahili in Tanzania, or you could study Akanchwe in Ghana or Zulu in South Africa. These are, or you have CFLI, which is our Southeast Asian flagship language initiatives, where you can either study Indonesian, Vietnamese, or Thai. If you're interested in any of the languages that I just mentioned, the flagship language initiatives are excellent programs that we have created for you. It includes a domestic summer component at either the University of Florida or the University of Wisconsin, and then you go abroad for the semester. These are very intensive languages. They're basically what I like to say real estate people. I don't know why. I don't have a house. Turnkey programs, you just kind of plug and play. If you apply the Boren and you say that you want to do the AFLI and the CFLI program, you don't have to do a separate application to also get into this program. These are very intensive. Most people gain at least around 2 or 3 language levels while they're there. Not for everybody, but if you are really wanting to get make some serious gains in those languages that I mentioned earlier, this is an excellent opportunity and an excellent they're excellent programs. That said, everyone else, and this is what the majority of the people do, are what we call self-identified programs. Self-identified programs are basically, in that scenario, you basically want to think of the Boren as a scholarship, basically, or as a fellowship. You have decided that you want to study Mandarin in Taiwan. You're going through your school. They have this intensive Chinese language program in Taiwan. Now you have to find a way to pay for it. You would apply for Boren, and Boren would be how you would pay for the program. But you are putting together your actual program while you're for how to study the language while you're overseas. That's what most people go on. And one of the really interesting and I think unique things about Boren is that because we are so focused on you obtaining language, we don't actually require that you receive credit with in these programs while you're abroad. You must maintain your matriculation at your school, so your school may require that you receive credit, but what that means for us is we're willing to fund things outside of the traditional study abroad program or on top of the traditional study abroad program. So say you're doing an intensive Chinese language program, and then you're like, oh, but I also want to take an extra class at the language school outside of that. We would also fund that. So anything that's language focused, we will fund. You just need to kind of show how you're going to learn language from it. So in order to be successful with the Boren application, Boren has certain preferences. I had previously mentioned that Boren has a preference for people to go for longer term. So you receive $25,000 to go for a year time frame. We also have country preferences. Previously, I had said that you have to be an eligible region. An eligible region is any of these countries that are not in gray. U.S., Canada, Australia, etc. All the other countries are eligible. The countries that are highlighted or colored, I guess, in green, those are our preferred countries. And we send a lot of students there. We fully intend to send students there in the upcoming years or what have you, this upcoming cycle. The countries that are colored in blue are also preferred countries, but we haven't sent students there in the last year, and we don't anticipate sending students there to study in the next upcoming cycle. And they're kind of your usual suspects if you look at it, like Haiti, Russia, etc. The Democratic Republic of Congo, things like that. You can still apply to those countries, but you will have to indicate a backup country where you can study the same language in that backup country or that alternate country. In addition, speaking of backup countries, so for blue countries, you have to indicate a backup on your application. Also, if you're studying Arabic, Mandarin, or Russian, you also need to put a backup country, just where you can study the same language. That's something we started during COVID because everyone's kind of moving around a lot. People aren't moving around nearly as much anymore, but those are by far the 3 most popular languages we have, and also the languages where they're spoken in more than one, widely spoken in other countries. So we do require that you put an alternate plan for a different country if you're studying one of those languages. Lastly, the countries in yellow are eligible, but they're not preferred. you can absolutely apply for one of those countries. It's just in your application, you have to indicate why it's critical, why it's important for you and for critical for US national security to study those languages. For instance, Mongolia is not a preferred country. It is eligible. However, it's smack dab between Russia and China. So I'm sure you can find some reasons why it'd be, good reasons to study good reasons to study Mongolian or what have you. And I can answer some questions later if you have questions about specific countries and what have you. In addition to country preferences and length preferences, we also have language preferences. So one thing that's unique about Boren and pretty great about Boren is that we absolutely support all the critical languages, similar to the critical language scholarship, but we'll also support a number of other languages as well. And so, again, if you look at these countries, they're not widely spoken, but they're the languages that are spoken in the countries that are eligible and are preferred. One thing I do want to point out is that French is only a preferred language if you study it through the African Flagship Language Initiative or the AFLI program that I mentioned earlier. One of the unique things that I really love about Boren is that with the exception of French and Spanish, none of these languages have a minimum proficiency requirement, nor do they have a maximum proficiency requirement. So, and again, these are less commonly taught languages, so that makes sense, right? So if you've decided that you want to study Georgian and you have never taken Georgian before, I don't know if Georgian is offered at University of Connecticut, but it's not widely offered around the US. So it makes sense that you've never taken it before. That is not a hindrance or a barrier for Boren. True beginners can and do receive the Boren and go on to study the proposed language. Same with being no, you can't ever have too much of a different language, basically. We're not going to say, well, you speak too much Tajik, and then there's nothing you can gain from going to Tajikistan and learning Tajik or what have you. You would just need to argue in your application why it's important for you to go and improve your Tajik. I did mention that the only two languages that do have a proficiency are French and Spanish. French is only preferred if you do it through the AFLI program. You can, but the minimum proficiency requirement for that program is intermediate high. And you do get tested as part of the application process. The other language that's not preferred, but it is eligible, is Spanish. And one exciting thing this year is that, so Spanish is widely spoken. And so historically we'd have a proficiency requirement of advanced. We've lowered that this year. So this year it's intermediate. It's intermediate high or whatever. It's like an LR2 or something like that. And the reason is because, advanced is extremely difficult to achieve just within college classes or what have you. So, there is that proficiency requirement, but we have lowered it so it's a way that it does kind of open up, the eligible languages where the eligible countries where you can speak Spanish, because you'll see that a lot of Latin American countries are preferred, but Spanish is not preferred. But you still can apply to a Latin American country to apply to speak Spanish if you meet the minimum proficiency requirement. That said, if you're not quite there, by far the most common way people study in Latin America is to study Portuguese in Brazil. I'm from Texas, and I know lots of people who either grew up speaking Spanish or they studied abroad and learned Spanish. And I would say 98% of them now are learning Portuguese just for fun, because that's what we do when we start languages. We want to learn as many as possible. And then lastly, so with the board, again, it's about we want to give students the opportunity to study less commonly taught languages. The regions that we've chosen are to highlight and to be preferred for Boren are countries that are considered critical to U.S. national security. And as I mentioned, it's a fairly generous award. In exchange for going abroad and studying a language for a year. After you graduate, you do need to work for the federal government for 1 year. You don't need to fulfill that requirement right after you return, nor do you get to fulfill it right after you graduate. If you're an undergraduate, you have 3 years to start fulfilling the service requirement. If you're a fellow, you have, or a graduate student, you have 2 years after you graduate. That said, while we don't hand you a job, we do give you a ton of support services in order to help you find that job. We have the INSEP service team, a national security education program, like directly, hired to help our Boren grantee or Boren alums find a federal job. We have a job board called incepnet.net, I think, or incepnet.gov, where they have jobs that are only open to students or people who are Boren alums. You get special hiring authorities for federal jobs. I know you get that also for CLS. The special, and maybe Caitlin knows a little bit more about them, but they are awesome if you're looking for a federal job. I'm not going to go into the whole HR process because it's very complicated, even more so when it comes to finding a federal job. But in a nutshell, you basically kind of get to skip a couple of different steps. Like by having these authorities, you kind of check extra boxes of eligibility for jobs or what have you. So it's a real leg up in trying to find a federal job. We also have an employment seminar where we bring people into DC for a couple of days, tell them how to navigate finding a job, how to navigate the security clearance. And the last day is just a job fair where you've got different federal agencies who are all looking to hire. In addition, that instant service team will also do resume consulting. If you have a job and you give them enough time, like a job interview and you give them enough time, they'll do interview coaching and like mock interviews and stuff like that to help you prepare. So I really like to think of Boren as not only an opportunity to go abroad, but it also is kind of career services as well. Again, you are responsible for finding your own job, but we do everything that we can to kind of support you in that journey so you can find that job. The application cycle is now. Our application will be opening shortly. It opens in fall 2025. If you are a Boren Fellow, so if you're a graduate student, the application deadline is January 21st, 2026. And if you're an undergraduate interested in the scholarship, the application deadline is January 28th, 2026. We have one application cycle a year. So for these application deadlines, those are for students who are wanting to go abroad in summer 2026, fall 2026, or spring 2027. So you do need to, if you're thinking of going abroad in spring of next year, you do want to think about it early. But it also gives you, if you do receive the award, your board advisor will help walk you through all the steps, what have you. These are the application deadlines. We will send out notifications in mid to late April. And then everyone who receives the award has to attend an in-person convocation in Washington, D.C. It's going to be the first week of June. And then the first day that you can depart is going to be June 4th, 2026 this year. So if you're going to depart anytime between June 4th this year and March 1st of next year, this application cycle is for you. All right. And that is it that is the Boren Awards in a nutshell. So I will now let you hear about the critical language scholar. Sure.
Thank you, Sarah. And I just want to highlight it's fantastic because not only do you learn language skills, you're exposed to another culture, and you receive funding for doing that, but it also seems like successful applicants really become part of a network and a community going forward. Yeah. Caitlin, let's hear about CLS.
All right, let me go ahead and share my screen now. All right, so hi and welcome everybody. Excited to be speaking with so many of you this morning, right? We're still in the morning for the East Coast. My name is Caitlin Ting. I am the manager for outreach and selection, the Critical Language Scholarship Program. For those of you who have not heard of CLS, I'd like to start off by giving you just a brief overview. We were launched in 2006 as part of the National Security Language Initiative. The CLS program is an intensive language-focused study abroad opportunity. It is fully funded by the U.S. government, whereas Sarah was discussing Boren as having a connection to the Department of Defense. CLS is funded by the Department of State. CLS provides U.S. students the opportunity to study languages of strategic importance to the United States national security, economic prosperity, and engagement with the world. And last year, between the CLS program overseas and our CLS Spark virtual initiative, instruction was offered in a dozen different languages. We had Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Indonesian, Japanese, Korean, Persian, Portuguese, Russian, Swahili, Turkish, and Urdu. So something very similar to Sarah's list. These are not languages that are necessarily going to be sending you to loads of places in the Western Hemisphere or Australia or New Zealand. CLS exclusively takes place during the summer over the course of 8 weeks. There are small group classes and activities that are facilitated by host institutions abroad. So again, kind of playing this compare and contrast game with Boren, just to try to help highlight where there are differences in our offerings. Sarah had mentioned that many of the instances with Boren are where an applicant is identifying a program to participate on. Whereas with CLS, everything is packaged up together, okay? There is no option for choose your own adventure in that same way. Outside of the classroom, CLS participants are assigned to language partners from their host communities to help practice everyday conversation skills. And then beyond the structured language classes, students are also immersing themselves in the culture through activities like tea ceremonies, calligraphy lessons, cultural visits to historic sites, virtual city tours, cooking classes virtually. And due to the program's intensity, students should be prepared to fully commit to CLS and CLS Spark, and should be setting aside other obligations or expectations for independent travel, research, or internships. CLS participants make significant gains in their language abilities. So in just the 8 weeks, students are completing the equivalent of 2 semesters of college level study, gaining a year's worth of language learning, and all of this can be transferred back to a student's home institution. Students are also receiving certification of their language gains through an ACTFL OPI certificate. This is something that is nationally recognized. The score can be listed on your resume after the fact. So this is wonderful to have. It definitely be considered a benefit. But of course, the language gains are actually not the only benefits. Participants of CLS become members of 2 robust alumni networks. There's the CLS Alumni Network, which is after this summer, it'll be just over 10,000 participants strong. And then CLS participants would also be joining the U.S. Department of State's International Exchange Alumni Network too. So for those of you who are thinking maybe CLS, I want to go over the eligibility for you. Students are eligible for our program if they are U.S. citizens or nationals enrolled in an accredited degree granting program at a U.S.-based institution at the time of applying. You do need to be at least 18 years old by May 15th of 2026 and have completed at least 1 full year of college level study by the start of the program. If you are going to be graduating in May or in December, that's totally fine. We just want you to be enrolled as a student this fall at the time of application. So I want to make that point, especially if you're graduating or you're transferring to a new institution. All of those changes are fine. They're wonderful. They don't impact your eligibility for CLS. Applicants for the CLS program at those overseas institutes may be at the undergraduate or graduate level. Applicants for our virtual initiative, CLS Spark, must be at the undergraduate level. And a really important point that I want to make is to emphasize that we want students from all different fields of study and all levels of language learning. The CLS program has something for everyone. So undergraduate, graduate student, you can go into dental school, You could be envisioning a career as a caseworker. You could be going into art history. You could be looking at engineering. All of those, we've supported students from all those backgrounds, right? So if you're thinking that you're maybe not traditionally a language learner, or you haven't yet made that tie, that connection between your academic and professional goals and language learning, that doesn't mean that CLS program doesn't have something for you, right? So because the CLS program oversees and CLS Spark serve different student needs, we have in the past used different application materials and selection criteria. So while our application for the fall is still being finalized, it is fair to say that the applications are going to be pretty similar to this past year's. So there will be 3 short answer essays and no letter of recommendation requirement. And for the CLS program overseas, we will also require a personal statement. So overall, a pretty small application package, and that is designed intentionally. We want to be welcoming and inclusive to students, again, from all different parts along their journey. For the CLS program overseas, we are looking for applicants who demonstrate a strong connection between participating in the program and their academic and professional goals. We do look for an emphasis on the readiness for participation in an intensive language-focused study abroad program. For CLS Spark, it's especially important to articulate the impact of the opportunity and how it fits in your personal and academic journey, right? CLS Spark has a little bit of a different origin story. It's a virtual initiative. It's really looking to provide access to students where there might otherwise be limited resources or opportunities. And then before we wrap up, I just want to make sure that everybody has an understanding of the general timeline. So each year, the CLS program aims to launch the application in early October. So we are hard at work, very busy right now, turning over materials and getting things ready for you all. And we close the application right before Thanksgiving. Okay, so it is a pretty quick turnaround. However, it is also pretty consistent from year to year, October to November. This is your time to work on a CLS application. This is your time to expect to be working on the CLS application. And again, we don't have an exact date yet for this year's application launch, but this is the timeline that we would hope to follow. Beyond November, when you hit submit, we then spend time conducting a 2-round selection process. So a very rigorous selection process. And as an applicant, you can expect to hear from the program first in late January. This is when we notify students of who is moving forward as a semifinalist. And then our finalist award notifications takes place in early March. All right. And I say this because I know usually after you hit submit, you're like, oh, it's a relief. And then you kind of forget about it and other things happen, which is great. But then you're going to get antsy probably after the holidays when your spring semester starts back up. So please keep in mind that you'd be hearing from us in January and then again in March. All right. And then alternate promotions, March through May. And then the programs themselves, actually, like I said, they take place over the summer. So that would be June to August. And this is our calendar for every year. So if the program is not something for this year, if you already have plans for next summer, you can take a note of this and you can be aware that it'll be the same for next year too. All right, so that brings me to the end of this formal presentation. If anybody has any questions for the future, please feel free to reach out to us at cls@americancouncils.org.
Wonderful, Caitlin. Thank you so much. And this is my understanding is that both of these are very competitive and prestigious programs. Do you have any information on acceptance rates?
Yeah, for CLS, I can say it's usually about a 10% acceptance rate. So it is competitive. You can't deny that. At the same time, I like to think of all fellowships really as kind of like, the cherry on top. These are supplemental, they are meant for enrichment. So it's really the process itself that is valuable to the applicant. It's just thinking through what are your plans, what are your goals, what gets you excited, because your homework is not always going to be what prompts that reflection. But then if you get the opportunity, yeah, cherry on top. Wow, who would have thought that you have this opportunity and it's paid for, and look where it's going to take you.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. We like to the acceptance rate for Boren is about a 1 in 5, but that's over the scholarships and the fellowships. It varies a little bit year to year. The scholarships tend to be a little bit lower, whereas the fellowships for graduates tends to be a little bit higher. We don't. I will say that the 1 in 5 is across all of Boren. It's not like any particular language or country is more competitive than the other. So it's not like, if everyone's applying for Arabic, it's not more competitive. It's across the whole. We're looking for the best forums, the best like future government
That's
leaders.
a great point to make, Sarah. I definitely get sometimes the question of which languages are the most competitive, which are the least competitive. It's about the fit, right, between the applicant and the program. It's not something to quote unquote game that's like not going to work to your benefit. You probably won't also have as enjoyable or successful of an experience, right? If it's just something that you try to like couple together to work those numbers. We want you to actually have the real robust experience with the reflection, with the excitement.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I'll mention too, Boren and CLS are kind of like cousin programs, and a lot of, not a lot, but if you they're obviously we're looking for students who are really interested in language, and so some people can and do receive both the CLS scholarship and the Boren scholarship for the same, and they'll stack them. They'll do the CLS like actual program, and then they'll go on and do their Boren like self-identified program or what have you. So it's a great way to learn a lot of language.
It really
and
is.
you can spend a lot of even more time overseas.
So there are a couple questions in the chat and the Q&A, so we'll get to those. And I believe this question came in relation to the Boren, but it applies to both. The question is, can you only apply to these programs if you are currently and actively seeking a position as a government employee?
So I'll speak because that's actually doesn't apply to CLS at all. So no, that is not the case. So in order to be eligible for Boren, you have to be matriculated in either an undergraduate or a graduate program. So you have to be in school, basically. You actually shouldn't be seeking you can be seeking a job, but you shouldn't be seeking a job while you're overseas. We actually want complete separation for the government. So if you are like ROTC or you do have a government, you have to kind of fully separate so you can focus on your language and not be, working with doing a job while you're overseas or what have you. So no, like you just have to be a student and like attached to some kind of US school or what have you. But you do need to, again, because we do have that federal service requirement, you do need to be interested in federal service because you will be trying to get a job afterwards, but you are by no means need to start applying for jobs before you even apply for the board or what have you.
And following up on the federal service requirement, it is a difficult time these days to
Yeah.
the federal job market is always difficult, but it's more challenging now. So what happens if an applicant does their absolute best but still cannot
So
is
that's, yeah, no, I know exactly. Like basically, what do they do if they can't find a job? Um, I can't look into the future. What I will say is that once you return from overseas, you still have to finish your degree. And then if you're an undergraduate student, you receive the Boren Scholarship, you have 3 years after you graduate to start that service. For fellowship, it's 2 years. That is the official time frame on paper. And that's also where the INSEP service team really comes into play. So once you finish your overseas program, we kind of hand you off and hand you over to the INSEP service team, and then you work with them directly. You get two separate like 1-year extensions on that 3-year, no questions asked. The clock will also stop if you go back to school. So if you graduate, May of 2028, the clock starts, that 3-year starts, then you go, then September of 2028, you go to grad school. It stops the entire time you're in grad school. I've known people who finished their Boren in like 2010, and they're just now getting around to starting their service because they're really educated. If you get a Fulbright Award or some other kind of government fellowship, it doesn't count towards service, but that would also stop the clock. And then how service works is basically you have to fill out this report for all the hours you've done per month, or like for all the service hours to get credit for it. Some people just get a job and they do a year and they say I've done a year. Some people get an internship, some people volunteer and they do it hour by hour. That counts as well. And that would also kind of push out your time frame. That said, I do understand, like right now, especially, if there's a hiring freeze and what have you, the government has had hiring freezes in the past. One thing to think about is that you wouldn't even start looking for your job for another 6 months to 2 or 3 years. And by that point, they have to hire people eventually. Like the government has to run, and they haven't been hiring people, so there will be a lot of jobs available. I can't tell. I mean, if things go completely kablooey, they'll be, what have you. But I will say the Inset service team, they're really good about helping you. We have the Boren Award started in 1994. We have, I think, 3% of the people since that time have had to pay back their award. Because if you don't fulfill the services, you have to pay it back. But again, 3% of people have had to pay it back since 1994. And typically that's usually been people they got a great job. They don't want to, they did this award and they're like, you know what, I got a job being a consultant and they're going to pay me a bunch of money and they're going to pay off my college fees and loans and stuff like that. So that's the most that's typically what happens. But again, it's just really uncommon because again, you have to just kind of not try for INSEP to not even try to help you. There's lots of extensions. There's lots of different routes to doing service, either through the federal government. You can do it as a contractor. Again, I work for IIE. I don't work for the federal government. I don't work in DC. I don't particularly want to live in DC. Lots of people love it. But because my job is to, promote Boren, this would count for service or have you, working for studying abroad, for various, ECA would count for service. It just kind of depends. But there's lots of different routes for it. And again, you have to really just not try, because I've seen, those meetings where they discuss people's service and it's well, I can see, they'll write their report and say, this is what I've done. Does it count? They're well, what else are they doing that is more geared toward what they're specifically looking for? And then your service advisor will come back to you and be this is how you should present it so you can get credit for the service. So it's not, again, I recognize it's not the best time to be looking for government work right now, but ideally in a few years it will be, because they'll need to fill out all these, empty spaces basically they've done. So.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. There's a question whether there is an age limit for Boren or CLS programs.
No. None for us either.
For us, you have to be matriculated, and school, you can always, as long as school will accept you and you're seeking a degree, then Boren will accept you, allow you to go abroad.
Yeah, we had a recent article, a spotlight done on one of our CLS Spark participants. And it was an individual who I think finally went to go to college, in their 60s or 70s after having raised family, generations of little ones. And finally got their chance to go to college. And it was a really wonderful story. They had a great time. Yeah.
And as a non-traditional student, you often are more serious, really, you've decided that this is what you want to learn. You really were focused on your language and you have a really interesting story oftentimes. So, which is only helpful.
Next question is, what is the average year of college that students are in when they apply for these programs?
That's a good question. I actually don't have an answer. We don't track that. I mean, I can say that we have predominantly undergraduate applications and recipients. We tried to make sure that our applicant pool and the demographics are representative then of who's being selected, so there's no like inadvertent bias taking place through our entirely external review process. So predominantly undergraduates as compared to graduate students. But beyond that, I don't actually have a stat to report on the average year. Sarah, I don't know if you do.
Yeah, I do not have the actual stats off the top of my head because that is I don't have a head for that. But I will say for fellows, it's a bit easier. Again, you have to be a graduate student. I would say majority of the students who are applying are in their master's programs or what have you, and they will either do it usually kind of towards the end before they graduate. For undergraduates, though, it really depends. Again, you have to be matriculated. So, similar to what Caitlin had said, like if you're graduating this fall or this upcoming May, that's fine. For board, you do have to maintain that matriculation. And we don't require that you're receiving credit overseas. So if your school allows you to defer your graduation, a lot of schools will let you walk, but you finished your credits and you don't actually like file the paperwork or whatever until until December or the next year. That's absolutely okay. That, in my opinion, is the best way to do it if your school allows you, because you could just focus on the language. You don't have to worry about the credits. But other than that, I would probably say most people do it probably like their junior or senior year, just because that's typically when students go abroad and they start thinking about going abroad as an undergraduate. So, but that said, we absolutely have had people who applied like their freshman year to start. So it just kind of depends on. We allow everything, and like Caitlin was saying, we try to have like a good mix of you know have everyone represented. But I would say just to kind of paint a wide brush, most undergraduates tend to start thinking about studying abroad their junior or senior year. So.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any additional questions in the chat or the Q&A. We will share the slides with everyone who attended today, so you'll have some take home resources available for your applications. And thank you everyone for attending today, and thank you so much. Oh, we just had one more question come in, so I will ask that before we continue. This again is a follow-up question on federal work. You can apply from whatever background in education, even if you don't plan on going into federal work.
So for the Boren, in order to receive, you are expected to work for the federal government for at least a year. Again, there's lots of different ways that you can fulfill that service. You can do it by being a contractor or what have you, kind of doing different work. So yes, you can apply from whatever background. And we prefer people who are interested in long-term service, long-term federal government work. That said, the requirement is that you work there for a year, or either within the federal government or a contractor or what have you. So I would say in your application that you're not interested in the federal government and you will do your requirement and then bounce. You could do that, but I wouldn't say that in your application when you're trying to get it. But yeah, like we do have some preferred majors or what have you. They're on our website, but again, as long as you kind of anyone from with any of the majors or whatever background you have is eligible and absolutely can write a successful application for that. But yeah, like I wouldn't talk about how you don't want to do federal work if you're applying for the board. No, for CLS, it's different.
Yeah. And I can confirm CLS, there's no expectation, no requirement that you're working with the federal government at any point. So we are welcoming folks from all stages in their educational backgrounds, as well as all fields of study for moving forward. The examples I gave before of like dental school or engineering and art history, those are all students we've seen come through like in the past 2 years, right? So we do have people from all different backgrounds. Sarah had mentioned also that in the past, CLS has had a special eligibility option to help students who are interested in working for the government or who are interested in seeing if they want to work for the government, right? Even though they're not dead set yet on a full-time career for the rest of their lives, fine. But right now, actually, pursuant to the presidential memorandum, there's a federal hiring freeze in effect until October 15th. And so that special eligibility for CLS alumni is going to be reviewed and communicated after that date. So it is currently on hold.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And there's another question that just came in. This person wrote, I noted that some programs required 1 year prior. Is this 1 year in the program or 1 year of previous language study?
This is probably for me. So a little bit of maybe both. You do need to have been in college for at least 1 year by the time the program starts. So you can be applying fall of your first semester of your first degree, associates or undergrad. That's great, because then by the time you wrap around to the summer when you could be in CLS, you will have completed your 2 semesters, right? So there is that kind of 1 year requirement. And that goes into effect mostly if you were, for example, dual enrolled between high school and college. I know some people are taking college courses, junior or senior year, even when they're in high school because they've completed the courses of their high school because there's one nearby. I don't know. There's many reasons, right? So that would be a problem there because you're probably not taking a full-time course load of college credits. You also probably wouldn't be meeting the requirement to be at least 18, right? So I want to note that. There are also then languages for CLS that do have prerequisites. If you are interested in one of those languages, I should clarify that you don't need to meet the prerequisites based solely on formal coursework. You are able to describe in your application how you satisfy the requirements through both like the background section and also your essays. You can be discussing how you have done informal tutoring or language conversation classes and partners. You could talk about maybe how you have experiences at home talking with mom and dad in a certain language. You could talk about how maybe you do have actually years of experience from high school that would give you the equivalent to 1 year of college study, for example. So it's up to you to kind of self-describe and make the case that you've got the equivalent of what would have been covered otherwise in a first-year college course. And so you make that argument. It's not going to be something that we're going to then check with an exam or check by looking for transcripts and seeing if you've got certain grades listed. Okay. And then the last thing I should note there is that you'd want to meet that requirement also by the summer of your actual program. So if you're applying in the fall and you could say, oh, mom and dad and I, we always spoke in Japanese at home. And then to add to the written component this year on my own, I'll be working my way through a Japanese 1 textbook so that I'm ready for Japanese at like an intermediate level, for example. That would suffice to get you to where you need to be, because by June, by the summer, you would have whatever the prerequisite is.
Okay, that was a great question. Thank you. All right. So I don't see any more questions. Thank you so much, Sarah and Caitlin, for your time and for explaining the ins and outs of these programs. And I hope that the attendees found this session useful and that you consider submitting your applications to Boren or to CLS. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thanks so much, everyone.